The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Jason just ran a marathon this Saturday. How often do you do that?
Gosh, this is probably my 12th or 13th.
Okay.
Wow.
So
yeah,
plenty painful enough then.
Yeah. And, wintertime in Salt Lake is not a great time to train. So you just don't get a lot of days. They're good days to get training in. So this was down in Moab where it was sunny, but the first one of the year always hurts quite a bit. Still limping around.
Yeah.
Hey, congratulations.
No. Most I've done is half of that. So yeah, congrats. Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Steven, joined by my co-host Mike and our special guest. Today, we're diving into a leadership trait that often determines the difference between your good leaders and your truly great ones, and that's emotional intelligence, EQ. And research from TalentSmart shows that 90% of top performers have high emotional intelligence, while 20% of low performers do. So despite this, many organizations overlook EQ when hiring and developing leaders. Our guest today has built a thriving business, not just through strategy, but through a deep understanding of human connection, whether it's empowering independent beauty professionals or leading his own team. Emotional intelligence is at the core of his leadership philosophy. Mike, introduce everyone to our guest today.
Yes, Steven. Excited about that. Absolutely happy to have Jason today on the show. So we're thrilled. Jason Olsen, he's the founder and the CEO of Image Studios, which many of you may have heard of or at least seen locally. So he's with us today. Jason's a seasoned entrepreneur. He's redefined, as you were bringing up, Steven, the beauty industry by providing high-end, fully equipped studio spaces for beauty professionals, really giving them the freedom to build their own business. So Jason, welcome to the show. We are so happy to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Maybe, Jason, we can start off with giving our audience and our listeners a little bit of background. Maybe just to start, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and then maybe how the emotional intelligence helped shape that journey?
Yeah. So I started Image Studios 15 years ago here in Salt Lake City, Utah. What we do is we're similar to like a WeWork or a co-working space, but instead of executive office suites for startups, we build salon suites for beauty professionals to run their own business. And so from 2010 to 2015, I built 5 locations here. And then in 2016, started franchising. And so went down that road. Today we have 105 locations open in 23 states across the country. And we've got another 42 that are under construction and will open at some point this year. So it's been a lot, very busy last couple of years, especially, but it's awesome. I love what we do. It's, we're empowering beauty professionals to essentially become entrepreneurs, and there's no better group of people to work with than entrepreneurs. So it's a lot of fun.
Gotcha. Yeah. And then in terms of like the emotional intelligence piece, how did that sort of, come into play and help shape kind of the path that you're on now?
I mean, I think it's a huge part. There's so many different ways that plays into it. I remember, something that kind of comes to mind. I was thinking about, a couple of years ago, our marketing team was clashing over the direction of a campaign that we were trying to launch. It was a national campaign, a lot at stake, a big budget, and we're trying to figure this out. But I could tell the team was getting pretty irritated and had reached a stalemate. And that was kind of a moment where there's the self-awareness moment, was just to like, okay, we need to probably take a second, cool off here. I think also to jump in and try and help regulate was not to pick a side, but what I started to notice is someone kind of quietly withdrew. You had another person who's sort of the loud, pushy person, that's really trying to dominate. And I think trying to understand those different emotions is part of that empathy piece of just, making sure you understand, what's going on the team, what's the dynamic there. But called a quick meeting, wanted each person to voice what was going on and what their concern was, and then just tried to guide everyone to a hybrid of something that they could buy into so that there was a resolution. What was interesting is this could have either gone into like a serious fight and caused a lot of shutdown, but what ended up is everyone kind of emerged with a better strategy and vision for the plan than was even originally worked out. Because I think in those moments of tension is where you start to have magic happen or disaster. And I think, if a low EQ leader is in a situation like that, they just might try and derail and force a top-down fix, right? Like, okay, you guys, like, I'm calling out, here's how it's going to work. You disengage everyone, and then you lose the magic of why you do in the first place, right? You're trying to get that, that extra ounce of effort, and you can kind of look at like the opposite of that. Uber's a great example. They were, they moved fast and broke all the rules, but Travis, Uber's founder, pre 2017. Yeah. Brilliant guy, but very abrasive. Not a lot of emotional connection to what's going on. There was a very toxic culture, massive PR disasters ended up costing him his job. Right. And I think that's just the result of, you see like the opposite, no self-check, no read on others. And, sometimes that blind drive can just be, it moves quick, but it can be pretty destructive too. And so you've got to figure out a way you still get results, but you got to keep people engaged, because at the end of the day, like that's who's, making all this happen is the team that's behind the brand.
Yeah, that's true. I think, some folks will talk about like the wake that you leave behind you, right? And so that boat sort of makes an advancement, can maybe move pretty quickly, but you leave like a pretty large wake. So yeah, that sounds like a great, story, obviously. And I'm sure it led to a lot of positive effects afterwards.
Jason, emotional intelligence is rarely discussed as kind of a core business advantage. I mean, but you kind of showed even in that one situation, like it coming to play in, holding space, I guess, or making sure, things didn't get derailed. Why do you think it's such a powerful differentiator?
I mean, I think if you really harness that, it allows you to tune in, because look, like business is very black and white. Like building a business is the easy part, figuring out how you solve the problems, how you build the machine. It gets tricky when you start to put humans in the positions, because humans are emotional, intelligent, sometimes rational, sometimes irrational, like people.
We're messy at times. Yeah.
Yeah. Like we're emotional. But so I always say business is easy until you add the human component. And that's where you just, if you can't tune into the human component, like you're missing half that formula, because no matter how good of a business it is on paper, or how good you can run it as a founder, if you ever want to scale, you've got to build a team. If you don't have the ability to tune into what's going on, to take that temperature with the team. And also more importantly too, is like the ability to tune in to your customers, right? Like I think the what's actually going on with my customer base. Like what do my customers actually feel about what I'm doing? Am I solving the right problems for my customer? I think there's I think a part of this too is an intuitive approach of just, also kind of having a gut feel of, is this the right thing to do? Are we on the right path? Are we, solving the right problems? But I think tuning in is probably the simplest way to explain it, of just, that you have to have that pulse check emotionally, because if there is no check on that can slide off the rails very quickly. And then it sets you back. You've got to have all this time spent cleaning up these issues, resolving complaints. And then, at the end of the day, you're running a race against your competitors. You need to stay in that race. And every time you have a blow up, you are pulled out of the race and time out. And it's not fun. And it's a lot
slowing you down. It's using up energy. It's, and like you said, if you're in a race, running a marathon or something, you don't want all that extra like ankle weights, right? Of that you're running with there, of all that, I guess, emotional problems and, untying all the knots and trying to get everyone back on the same direction.
Yeah. Call it avoidable grief.
Yeah.
It reminded me a bit of the game of hockey, right? I mean, you have one player that goes off and, creates a penalty, gets thrown in the box, and all of a sudden, now you're a person down and, you've put all the stress and pressure on the rest of your teammates to try to battle with the competition while you're in a box. So yeah, it makes a ton of sense, right, to avoid all that destruction. So, but it sounds though, or it seems like, Jason, let me know if you think we're wrong, that there's some misconceptions when it comes to emotional intelligence and leadership. And I found a study that when I was prepping for the show that actually mentioned that, though companies that have, highly emotionally intelligent leaders, they tend to experience 34% higher employee engagement. But it just seems like some leaders are a little bit hesitant when it comes to the topic of EQ or emotional intelligence. Why do you think that is, or what do you think some of the misconceptions are when it comes to this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would think right off the bat, people probably think EQ is just about being nice. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just a over talked about soft skill, or maybe something that's not that important like IQ. But I think it's actually proven to be a very strong driver of success, especially in leadership, because if what's leadership about? It's getting people to follow you.
Right. And
you can force them, or you can, inspire them, and you get just so many better results. And I think that's where, I think people think are you born with it or not? Just like, I would say IQ is generally like that. I think that's where, you're not born with just an exact IQ, but I think that's a little bit more fixed than probably EQ, which I think is a lot more trainable. Maybe people think it's more pigeonholed for, what you deal with family and friends, not work, right? I think the reality is this is all about a communication strategy, conversational intelligence. Like if communication is influence, and how do you communicate and influence people to follow what you're trying to do as a leader? So I see it as like, nothing about being nice. It's about being understood, because if you can get that vision communicated, then you have kind of the benefit of, stronger communication, being understood. It makes conflict resolution a lot easier. Again, active listening, trying to understand what's going on. Again, not about being nice. It's just being about understood. Yeah. I think one of the most frustrating things that everyone feels is like when you're just not being understood, like no one's listening to me. Like I have something to say, like, let's make sure we listen, but like, let's figure out how we can do this, mediate what's going on without picking a winner or a loser. But you want to be able to just get through that, keep the team intact. Because again, like it's that avoidable grief. Like every time you have these kind of upsets, blow-ups, or setbacks, you've got to now clean up the mess, right? And that's what the leader's there to do. And I think it also, there's nothing more like, I think, fulfilling than when you have a conversation with someone or have a meeting with someone when you walk away going like, I actually feel like they really understood what I was saying. They don't have to agree with me, right? But to be understood, to be seen, I think empowers people, because, then you've got people who are probably more likely to take risks and share ideas, who also want to stick around because they feel like they are a part of this team. They're part of that community. So, but it's definitely not a solo act. I think if the leader can demonstrate good EQ skills, it sets a tone. People start mirroring that behavior. And then that starts to trickle down. I mean, everything starts with the founder or the CEO in an organization. When people say, I don't love the culture in my company, it's like, well, that's kind of your fault. Like if you're the founder, because it starts with you, because before there's employees, it's just the founder. And then there's a first hire. Well, the first hire learns the culture from the founder. And then the second hire learns from both. Like it's literally set from the top down, whether people like it or not. And so it's just, if you can start that foundation right, you can, really be intentional about how you want culture to look, using some of these strengths with EQ and emotional intelligence to, again, I think the main thing is just you're trying to make sure people understand what you see in your head so they'll follow you, and put in, every ounce of effort they can to make that vision a reality.
Yeah. I love that point. Yeah. Cause, one of my mentors a long time ago used to say that, people are your greatest asset. And if they're totally disengaged, I mean, you're basically putting to waste, the greatest asset that we have. So that's so very true in terms of what, your statement, so that everybody kind of gets on the same page and rows in the same direction.
Mm-hmm. You kind of mentioned the sort of, ripple effect, I'll say, from you to, I don't know if I want to say trickle down. I want to say like a ripple effect from you to, your employees in your community of independent professionals. It's kind of interesting because you've got all these independent people coming together. So how has emotional intelligence played a role in how, that ripple effect occurs from you and, your headquarters down to the independent, professionals, and then to their customers and engaging their customers?
Yeah, I mean, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, but a strong EQ is how you fundamentally understand what your customers actually want. And I think this is where I see a lot of businesses that put not a lot of effort into really studying their customer and really thinking who they are, what drives them. I mean, the biggest thing at the end of the day, a company makes money when it solves a problem better than the competition, or it solves a new problem that's not being solved. They make a ton of money, right? So business, profitability is all about solving problems. When you can solve a problem for a customer, they reward you with their pocketbook. Like they're going to spend money because you make their life better or easier in some form or fashion. And so, and for us, especially, we're building a community of entrepreneurs, right now, 2,500 entrepreneurs and growing across the country.
Wow.
But being able to communicate to them, speak to their emotions, what it's like to start a business. It's scary, it's fun, it's exciting, it's everything in between. It's a bipolar roller coaster of emotions when you start a business. But they're our customer, right? So we've got to be able to speak to them so they feel understood, because when they feel understood, they're like, this is a brand I can work with. Like they get me. I can see myself working there. So I think it's played a huge part, because especially the beauty industry is a very social industry, very creative. It's an artistic industry. There's a lot of emotion behind why people get into this industry. They want to help others look and feel beautiful. They want to have these relationships with clients. And so EQ is fundamental for them, but especially for us. If we're not speaking their language, which is, having EQ to understand how to speak to them, it's not going to work out for us, right? We've got to be able to speak their language and meet them where they're at and help them understand that we know what they're going through and we're here to help. And that's what problem we solve, is how to start a business.
Yeah, I love that statistic there, Jason. So within Image Studios, you're touching about 2,500 beauty professionals.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And you said that's through 105 stores you mentioned, or how many was it?
Yeah, about 105 stores we have open right now in 23 states.
Man, so the possibility, so if you're going to be adding 40 new stores, I mean, you could roughly get to touching another 1,100, maybe 1,200 beauty professionals through those stores. Man, that is an incredible community you've built. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Another topic, sort of staying on this part of emotional intelligence. There was a study that I found that customers were saying that they were willing to spend 140% more. To your point, about listening to the customer, right? They were willing to spend 140% more with companies that offered a very positive emotional experience, right? Which I think, wow, at least from what I've looked into with Image Studios, it really seems like that's what you're doing for these investment professionals. So question for you though, like, how do you ensure that your brand consistently delivers that type of emotionally engaging experience with these professionals?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with understanding what emotions are actually going through to be able to speak to those. If you think about what we do, in the traditional sense of like, a business provides a service and has a customer, right? So what we're selling is a lifestyle change, right? We're basically inviting people to quit their job and sign a lease and move into one of our spaces and run their own business. Like that's a tough sell, right? Like quit stability, move your clients over, become an entrepreneur. Well, I mean, but it's also an exciting story to tell, right? So I think storytelling is a big part of that, because we tell that really well. I mean, it's that dream that, a lot of these individuals have in beauty, which is not a lot of people in the beauty industry dream about working for someone for the rest of their life. Like as an artist, as a creative, they're probably thinking like at some point, how do I go out on my own and make a name for myself? Like most artists want to have that kind of freedom to really, make their mark in what they're doing. And so, but there's also then when you think about, you're trying to get people to make a big move, it's, I'd say there's obviously an analytical component to it, but I'd say 95% of the decision is emotional. And EQ is essential to knowing how to tap into the right emotions, and then also acknowledge the ones that are negative, right? Because there's a lot of fear when you're going to start a business, but everyone's scared when they're starting a business. Like if someone's getting into business and they're not scared, they're not thinking through all the risk. Like that's just plain and simple. Like there is risk in everything, right? The difference is an entrepreneur can look at the risk and they still act. Right. And so the difference is they're doers instead of just dreamers. They dream and then do. But there's a lot of ups and downs in that whole process. And what we don't want to do is tell people it's just going to be a walk in the park. There are ups and downs. It is an emotional roller coaster, but it's taking that leap of faith. And the way we do that is then we show them success stories, examples of people just like them doing the same types of beauty services they do, estheticians, nail artists, hairstylists, barbers, and we let them see themselves in these people that we use as brand ambassadors. Because when people can identify with someone and connect, even if it's a marketing piece, but if I can see myself in that person, I am now like, I'm one step mentally in there because I can relate, right? I see myself. And so that's the biggest things people are thinking about is, gosh, if they're going to make this move, will I fit in? Will I be successful? Like those are two of the main things, right? So how do we speak to that and speak to it well so that they understand how people just like them who have had the same feelings, thoughts, doubts, and excitements and all this is how they did it. And this is their success story. And so, again, it's that showing them a path to success. We've been doing it for years now, since our inception. But I think at the end of the day, there is just when you see yourself in someone who you're looking up to or inspired by, that's when you really start to connect the dots. If you're trying to think of something to do and make a move like this, and there's nothing you can relate to, it's a really tough sell, because it's, again, it comes back to, gosh, am I going to fit in? Am I going to be a good member of this community? And is this going to work out for me, or do I have to go back and work for someone? So we just want to make sure we tap into that and explain, through great storytelling how that works. And it works really well to get people excited.
Yeah.
How do you help your professionals see themselves in their customers? I think because empathy is kind of a big sort of, I guess, motivator, or, if I'm a beauty professional, people are coming to me maybe before their most important days sometimes, right? They've got a big event, maybe it's a job interview, maybe it's even, a wedding or something like that. You've got all kinds of reasons why people are coming to you. How do you work with them to kind of empathize with their customers and see themselves in their customers?
I think it's probably a little different for a beauty professional and their client base, because I think a lot of the magic that happens behind the chair in beauty is allowing the client to see themselves in their best self, their best form, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's a natural connection that they have, because I think EQ is quite high in beauty because people are naturally socially gifted and great with people. They have great people skills. But I think really it's a little different when you're behind the chair working with a client, because what your goal now is like, I've got a connection with this person, but I need them to connect with their own person, right? Yeah. Like, and that's when they transform.
This is not an easy task.
No,
this is definitely an art form.
Like, this is why beauty is tough, is because sometimes you do incredible work on someone, you show them the mirror and they end up in tears and you think you did a great job, but maybe the client's like, this is not what I wanted. But I would say, 98% of the time people turn around, look in the mirror, and they just are like, oh my gosh, I love this. It's that renewed self-confidence. It's just that, it's the boost that people are looking for, is like, I just want to look good. I want to feel good. Like this is a way I can do it. And beauty's always been an avenue for that. And so I think that's where it's more of, here's the mirror and what do you see now? And it lets people see a different part of themselves they may not have noticed before, but the beauty professional sees it, right? And they're helping to uncover that and really make people look their best. And that's what I think is so rewarding about being in beauty, is that's what you get to do all day long, is just, bring this excitement and this big smile to people's faces with what before and after looks like. And it's huge for them. And that's why there's so much loyalty in beauty. Clients stick with a beauty professional for years, because the last thing they want to do is, your face is kind of this gateway to your world. Like that is what you present to the world. That's your visage, right? And so when you allow someone to alter the look of your face and your hair, that's a pretty trusting environment. Like you don't just want to let anyone do that. So when they find someone that does a great job, they are very loyal. That's why this industry works so well when people get into it and do really well, is they create a very loyal customer base that follows for years.
We've got
a question from the audience
here. So Jason, how did Image Studios manage to navigate the pandemic?
Yeah, good question. That was a fun period of time, but it actually ended up working out really well for us. In the states where we were required to shut down, we obviously had to shut down for a period of time, whatever those requirements were. But what we found was, because our spaces are, single occupant rooms. So when you walk in one of our spaces, there's probably 30 to 40 studios. Each of them has a storefront, a door that locks, but it's one person in the room with one client. And so I would say post shutdown, but still pandemic jitters, where we weren't sure where this was going to go. People were nervous to come back around a lot of other people. You can imagine as a client going into a traditional salon where there's 15 or 20 chairs all next to each other. A lot of people were nervous about that. They were like, I don't know if I want to come back like that. And what we found was, the studio set up where it's just one person and one client in a private room made people feel safe. They weren't exposed to all sorts of other people around them. And so it really became kind of a perfect model post-COVID, because it's a safer way to work. And we saw a huge boom in demand that came off of that, which has been great. It's been great for our industry. So not that COVID was great, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. It was a good model to be able to sort of come back and, get business started again. So, and reconnecting with people. Jason, maybe staying on this topic a little bit. So scaling a business can definitely, like you mentioned earlier, have like some immense pressure, right? But then it seems like leaders with high emotional intelligence, according to Forbes, actually, there was a study that they did, that leaders with high emotional intelligence are 70% more likely to successfully navigate business growth, which, probably with the business growth that you've seen, and even navigating something like the pandemic, took a good amount of emotional intelligence to be able to come out of that, successfully. But so I'm curious, like, what advice would you give then to other leaders who want to scale their businesses while trying to maintain strong emotional intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, scaling operations is essentially a pressure cooker. So it's more people, the stakes are bigger. You've got tighter timelines, you've got more eyeballs on you, all the pressure, right? So I think, having strong EQ, especially during those chaotic times, it's not just nice to have, but it's a lifeline. Like, it keeps you and your team intact. And I think that's where, we've gone through some really high growth phases. Last year we opened up 30 stores. This year will be 42. I mean, those are a lot of stores to open, a lot of construction projects to manage. And that's where, as you scale, it's how do you scale communication, not just headcount, right? And so as teams grow, as the organization gets bigger, you got more layers, that's where stuff gets lost in the minutia. And so you've got those misalignments can happen all over the place. But again, that EQ component is just, how are you reading the room, or how are you reading the overall sentiment of your company, of your team, and sensing who really needs a check-in, who needs to be, where's some human touch needed in this, right? Because when things are moving fast, some people can get left behind and you'll never know it until it's too late. Like then they end up giving a notice, or they just end up burning out. And so I think that's, scaling communication is key. So how can you continue to scale communication as the business gets bigger to make sure that the vision from the leader, from the founder, the CEO, I think that's where in any sort of messy middle, I call it, when a company is really scaling, is you've always have to zoom out. What's the big picture? What's the why? And remind people of the overall, zoomed out, what's our 10-year plan? Why? What's the why behind doing this? Like, when everyone's stuck in, the inflation drama that we went through and costs going up, and construction supply chain delays, like that was chaotic, but we had to stop and be like, guys, but what are we doing here? Like, these will get built. It may be delayed, but what we are doing is building opportunity for all these beauty professionals that will find home here. And again, just advancing our mission to help people start a business at Image Studios. So you've got to remind that, of what's the big why here, because if you get too caught in the weeds and you're not reading the room, like, people will get siloed in all this stress and trauma, and it's going to be a tough thing to pull out of. And then I think just, there's a lot of pressure when you're scaling as a leader. It's messy. There's delays. You got bottlenecks. You got cash crunches, just general growing pains, stretch marks of an emerging business, getting bigger. It's tough. So if you lose it, your team is for sure going to lose it. And even when you want to lose it and scream into the abyss, like, you can't, right? You've got to maintain that calm, collective confidence. So many times I realized when you felt those growing pains, is I could see my team looking at me, be like, what do you think? And I'm like, I am totally confident. Like, we're going to be just fine. Like, this is just a growing pain we're going through. Yeah. And I realized, like, gosh, people needed to hear that a lot. Right. And so it's just like, again, trying to take the pulse, what's the temperature, and then make sure you respond to that with the confidence and clarity, so people know that there's a plan. We're going to get through it. But a lot of times, if employees are not given big picture or the why behind things, everyone's felt that, like, I don't know why this company's doing this new directive. It's like, maybe they should explain why. I get it. It's just a bigger picture behind that. And again, I think it's just, again, taking that temperature check on what's going on, especially if you're scaling, because it's always challenging. There's no way to scale without some pain. It's just part of it.
Yeah, for sure. So maintain that emotional intelligence. I love that, because I think as you look at any world, like the business world, the sports world, those leaders, the ones that kind of, can remain at, even in politically in times of war, right? You think of what some of the leaders did to calm everybody. I think of Eisenhower with his troops, like right before they're going to storm, Normandy, right? And the visits that he would give and how he would talk to the soldiers, and it definitely eased a lot of emotion and kind of kept everybody focused on what was the task at hand. You're actually touching on one of my favorite topics that we love to talk about, Jason, on this show, and that is purpose. We know it plays a big role, at times in organizations. So I like to ask all of our guests, and you touched on this already a little bit in the response that you just provided, but I like to ask all the guests this same question. So what role does having a well-defined purpose serve as a business, as it plays in the overall success? Like, why is purpose so important, to a business?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that's the why, right? And I think I'm always shocked at how many brands, businesses in general, just like I don't know if they don't understand their why, and it's kind of just been inherent, but they don't talk about it. But again, it's kind of back to that storytelling. Like a founder does not start a company unless they're trying to solve a problem that they know is real, right? They're either they ran into a problem and they're like, no one's solving this, I'll start a company. Or they see an opportunity to start something that solves a problem for a group of people and they get passionate about it. But the purpose, the why behind it all, I think that gets lost so quickly, because I think people think, yeah, I understood that in the beginning, but I think they forget how important it is. I mean, think about, 5 years into a growing company, how many of your employees were there day one? Probably not a lot, because you didn't have the full team day one and you have turnover. And so it's like the founder's story, the vision for the company, you may feel like you're on repeat, but they don't feel that way. Like they need reminders, and new people may not even ever hear it, because a leader may just think, gosh, I've said this a bunch the last year. And it's like, I don't think you can talk about purpose and why enough, because you have to constantly remind people, because you have to assume, is just the founder or the leader of an organization is probably, especially if founders, got the most skin in the game, like the most risk that's been put up to get this thing going. So it's important that they continue to explain and reinforce the why and the purpose behind what they're doing, to just constantly remind people. I mean, we all know this, like you have to hear stuff several times before it starts to sink in anyways. And it's like, I've learned just through trial and error, like being a broken record is nothing but good. Like you may get annoyed at yourself. Like I hear myself say this over and over, but it's like, but it needs to be said, because half the people here probably have never heard it, and the other half probably weren't paying attention as much last time, and it just needs to be repeated. So just, I think, be stubborn with your purpose, be like pathologically stubborn, just because when you start to stray and doubt and kind of get stuck in your head, if you're constantly focused on it too, though, it helps bring you back. And that's a struggle that every founder has, is like, we're dealing with a lot of stress. And so you've got to lay a groundwork for you to pull yourself back as well.
I love that. Be pathological with your purpose, for sure, right? Like ad nauseum, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, with our AI chief marketing officer software, this is the first place we want people to start. We take them through this like exercise on trying to figure out their why, and it's a pretty robust exercise, because like you said, we want that within our software, so that then the stories that we're able to tell are always tying back to that why. Because like you said, you've got to repeat and get it to sink in. Going back to this thought on emotional intelligence, what would you say some of the practical steps are, first steps maybe leaders can take to try and improve their EQ? I often think of like, consider yourself in service to your teams, and other people kind of flipping that model, and that way you start to think about more of a empathetic kind of approach. What do you think are some of the practical first steps like a leader can take?
I mean, I think the first step is that self-awareness piece, right? Like, if you're not great at self-awareness, it's a skill you can hone, but just trying to be, tune in to, like, I think the whole key behind self-awareness is, how am I being perceived? Not just how I think, but like, how do I think they think of me, right? Like, and I think that's the extra step that gets tricky, which pulls in the empathy piece, right? Because I've got to now think how, put myself in their shoes, feel what they're going through, and then relate back and reflect back. Like, how are they seeing me, to kind of tie the loop on self-reflection, so that you can tune in and know, like, what everyone's feeling. And again, it's not like I said earlier, EQ is not about playing nice. It's just about just simply understanding the emotional dynamic between human beings. Like, it's tricky. But you get good at it, and you can get people to follow you. And that's when, again, magic starts to happen. And so, and I think it's interesting, because there's some interview questions that I use to kind of filter out for EQ and self-awareness. And even when I ask these questions to people, I will always go first. And it's always a good reminder, because it's just, sometimes it can be uncomfortable to answer these questions I've answered a million times.
Yeah.
But you just realize, like, it's a constant thing you have to keep focused on, because it's the path of least resistance is to just keep moving. The tougher path is to, like, really think about the wake, the ripple, like you talked about, and make sure you're realizing what the impact is and how that's going on. So.
Yeah. So Jason, a question I always ask before we wrap up, do you think love belongs in business?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, you should love what you do in business, because it makes it so much fun. You've got to really love your customer, great customer service, serving the customer in every way you can. And again, there's just nothing wrong that comes out of love, right? Like the Beatles said, all you need is love. It really does. If you can, embrace that and project that out, I think magic starts to happen. So.
Yeah, this question is me being pathological with my purpose. So just getting more and more repetitions from different people saying, everyone says something different, which is always exciting to me to hear everyone's answer on that.
I love the connection to the Beatles, right? And all you need is love. It's so true, right? We could be having that song playing in our heads. So, Jason, it's been a powerful conversation today. Thank you so much, really, for your insights, your examples, and real life instances of emotional intelligence being applied to leadership. I think it's absolutely invaluable. We do want to let our listeners know if they want to connect with you or learn more about you, where should they go to learn about you and Image Studios?
Yeah, so our website is imagestudios360.com. That's our corporate website that is forward-facing for beauty professionals. If anyone's interested in becoming a franchise owner, that website is imagestudiosfranchise.com. And then if you're on LinkedIn, just search Jason Olsen Image Studios, and I should pop up somewhere at the top, hopefully. LinkedIn's a great way to connect as well.
Well, thank you, Jason. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If this discussion inspired you, be sure to subscribe and share this episode. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.